Hello and welcome to Stories of Science. Here, we look back on humanity's long journey to understand the world. The questions, the failures, and the breakthroughs that slowly changed how we see the universe and ourselves. We tell science as stories. He had no training yet rewrote mathematics. In the history of science, very few people have managed to do something this wild, walk straight into the deepest rooms of mathematics with almost no formal training, like a player who accidentally glitches through the wall and finds the game engine running underneath. Years later, entire teams of mathematicians would spend decades proving results he scribbled down casually. When he wrote them, his reaction was basically, well, that's obvious. He wasn't trying to revolutionize mathematics. He wasn't chasing fame, tenure, or academic glory. He was just talking to infinity. And that young man from a small town in South India who didn't yet realize he was reshaping the future of mathematics was Srimavasa Ramanujan. Late 19th century South India was not exactly the place you'd expect a mathematical legend to spawn. This wasn't Cambridge or Paris. There were no chalkboards full of cutting-edge theory or professors arguing about number theory over tea. Instead, the air carried temple incense, humid heat, ritual chants, and a rhythm of life that moved like it had nowhere urgent to be. Streets were filled with vendors, ceremonies, prayers, and everyday survival, a world closer to mythology than to laboratories. That's where Ramanujan was born. His family wasn't destitute, but they lived in that fragile middle zone, enough to get by, no margin for surprises. His father worked in a cloth shop, steady income, limited ceiling. His mother was the emotional and spiritual center of the household, deeply religious, steeped in devotional music and symbolism. Dreams, omens, divine hints to her, these weren't abstractions. They were part of daily life. Math, at this point, wasn't a career path. It was more like a quiet calling no one had identified yet. From a young age, Ramanujan displayed a trait that didn't fit neatly into good at school. He wasn't just capable with numbers, he was absorbed by them. Most kids see arithmetic as a task. He saw patterns, relationships, hidden architecture. Other children memorized poems. He mentally scrolled through infinite series. You couldn't really call it studying. It was more like recognition, as if numbers weren't new information but old acquaintances returning. He would sit in long stretches of silence, then suddenly fill pages with symbols that baffled everyone around him. His mother interpreted this through her spiritual lens, divine blessing. From a modern perspective, it looks like something else, intuition operating at an extreme level, subconscious computation bursting into conscious form. Either way, the remarkable thing is this: no one shut it down. In a household shaped by spiritual acceptance, his unusual mental habits weren't treated as a problem to fix, they were tolerated, even respected. As the English saying goes, truth is stranger than fiction, and in this house, strange didn't automatically mean wrong. When he entered school, the contrast sharpened. Teachers quickly realized this boy solved problems in a way that bypassed the expected route. Most students followed steps like climbing stairs. Ramanujan teleported to the roof. Ask him how he got there, and you'd get a shrug and something like, "It's just how it is." Not arrogance. Not defiance. His brain simply didn't use the same scaffolding. Soon he was exploring ideas far beyond the curriculum. Prime numbers, series, numerical identities, not assignments, but puzzles pulling him forward. The classroom became less a place of instruction and more his personal math playground. Teachers were caught in a paradox: this student was clearly ahead, yet impossible to standardize. Education systems thrive on method. Ramanujan thrived on leaps. Classmates sensed the difference too. While they optimized for exams, he wandered into infinity. It wasn't just a gap in skill, it felt like a mismatch in dimensions. He wasn't learning math the way others did. He was building a private language with it. Meanwhile, the spiritual atmosphere at home layered everything with mystique. His mother believed inspiration came from the divine. Ramanujan himself would later describe formulas appearing in dreams not as literal miracles, but as intuition surfacing faster than conscious reasoning could keep up. Whether framed as spirituality or cognition, one fact was undeniable: his thinking was already diverging from the rails of formal education. No elite mentorship. No structured training. Yet he was assembling a personal mathematical universe piece by piece. To observers, it looked like raw genius. To him, it felt normal, just following the thread wherever it led. And in that quiet South Indian town, far from academic capitals, a teenager was already negotiating with infinity. He didn't know about international journals or scholarly prestige. He simply chased the order hidden inside numbers. A boy with no formal system, already holding conversations with the infinite. The door to a larger mathematical world didn't open with a lecture or a mentor. It opened with a book, a modest compilation by G.S. Carr, essentially a dense catalog of formulas with minimal explanation. To most students, it was reference material. To Ramanujan, it was like stumbling onto the operating manual of the universe. Pages packed with results, proofs optional, perfect. His mind was wired for outcomes first, justification later. He devoured the formulas, not memorizing, but dissecting, recombining, extending. Imagine someone handed sheet music and immediately began improvising symphonies. Formulas became building blocks. Every rearrangement hinted at a new structure. Very quickly, his notebooks filled with results that went far beyond Carr's text. But every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and in this case, the reaction came from reality. Education demanded balance. Ramanujan's attention had been completely hijacked by mathematics. Other subjects faded into static. Literature, history, background noise. Math grades, spectacular. Everything else, vanishing act. Teachers stared at the transcripts like they were glitch reports. Was this brilliance, or a system error? Standardized exams don't negotiate. He repeatedly lost academic standing because his overall performance didn't meet institutional thresholds. The world's rules don't bend just because you're exceptional. And here the tension crystallized: extraordinary intuition doesn't automatically convert into credentials or employment. As the proverb goes, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Ramanujan had chosen the cake of infinity, and real life sent the bill. His response wasn't compromise. It was deeper immersion. Each new discovery reinforced his conviction that this, not formal schooling, was his terrain. His notebooks multiplied, dense forests of series, identities, conjectures. Often no proofs. Just conclusions, like snapshots taken directly from thought. Teachers noticed the same surreal pattern again and again, problems solved without visible pathways. Others climbed ladders. He stepped through doors. Classmates oscillated between awe and confusion. He wasn't flashy or competitive. He was absorbed like a researcher accidentally placed inside a classroom. Math wasn't a tool for him. It was conversation. Meanwhile, the practical consequences grew heavier. No diploma. No steady work. Family pressure mounted. Yet his explorations only intensified. Exercises evolved into original results. He was constructing knowledge beyond what his educational environment could even categorize. It was an uneven fight, one self-taught mind versus an entire standardized system. His only weapon? A near-instinctive grasp of numerical structure. The formulas became so intricate that trained mathematicians would later pause to parse them. Ramanujan himself rarely bothered explaining the route. In his internal map, the destination was already clear. And so the paradox sharpened. A young man repeatedly rejected by formal structures was independently generating world-class mathematics. The institution had no slot for him, but mathematics itself seemed to be holding the door open. He wrote formulas professors couldn't immediately decode, and he didn't feel the need to justify them. As they say, the proof is in the pudding. Except here, the pudding was infinity and he was just getting started. Stories about genius often get polished into fairy tales, where inspiration magically pays the rent. Reality was less cinematic. For a long stretch, Ramanujan lived a life with extremely high mathematical density and extremely low cash flow. Leaving school meant entering survival mode. Job attempts fizzled not from laziness, but because his mind refused to stay anchored to clerical routine. Ledger entries morphed into number sequences. Administrative paperwork sprouted side calculations. Employers wanted reliability. He was a high-voltage thinker constantly at risk of wandering into abstraction mid-shift. Income instability meant real pressure. Friends gradually realized that this brilliant, number-obsessed companion might genuinely go hungry because he couldn't stop doing math. Support networks formed, informal, fragile, and so a nearly mythic image emerged. A future mathematical icon living on borrowed meals. Money scarce. Formulas abundant. Not metaphor, daily reality. His pockets were empty, but his notebooks were overflowing. Page after page carried identities, series, conjectures, deposits into a future intellectual bank no one else yet recognized. Marriage added another layer of responsibility. Groceries don't accept infinite series as payment. Family concerns sometimes surfaced with dry humor. Can mathematics buy rice? Funny on the surface, devastatingly accurate underneath. Yet Ramanujan didn't retreat. His attachment to mathematics wasn't career ambition, it was existential alignment. Many people work to live. He calculated to breathe. Even under strain, he documented results obsessively, as if archiving messages for whoever might someday read them. Those notebooks became treasure vaults. Structures sprawled across the pages like constellations. Later mathematicians would describe them as transmissions from an unfamiliar domain, elegant, dense, ahead of their time. There were emotional troughs, of course. Poverty isn't romantic when you're inside it. Social uncertainty weighed heavily. While Pierce pursued stable professions, he navigated a path with no safety net. But hardship didn't extinguish his drive. It sharpened it. Each insight was a declaration, this mattered. He invested energy where he believed meaning lived inside patterns that transcended circumstance. Even on an empty stomach, his mind kept mapping relationships, searching symmetries, pushing toward unseen order. In that phase, mathematics wasn't hobby or profession. It was structural support for hope. He was, quite literally, proving infinity while flirting with hunger. And those fragile sheets of paper inked in cramped conditions were about to leave that small room and travel into the global mathematical conversation. The legend wasn't born in comfort. It was written in persistence. When life started closing in on him, when the math notebooks were overflowing but his future looked painfully empty, Ramanujan did something that, on the surface, felt almost naive. He wrote letters. Not polished academic papers. Not job applications. Not carefully framed introductions. Just pages of formulas, dense, unapologetic, and completely uninterested in explaining themselves. It was as if he sliced open his thought process, stacked the pieces neatly, and mailed them across the ocean. No warm-up. No credentials. Just mathematics saying, "Here I am." He addressed those envelopes to leading British mathematicians, the gatekeepers of a world he had never seen. From his side, it was an act of desperation mixed with quiet confidence. If numbers meant what he believed they meant, someone out there would recognize the signal. Reality answered first. Most recipients didn't know what to do with the letters. Unknown sender. No formal education. Pages full of claims without proofs. Academic culture, by necessity, is cautious. Extraordinary statements from strangers usually get filtered out for survival. So several letters vanished into silence like messages in bottles swallowed by the tide, until one reached the right desk. When Hardy opened the envelope, his first reaction wasn't excitement. It was suspicion. The formulas were bold, too bold. They didn't read like exercises, and they didn't follow the polite rhythm of published research. They jumped straight to conclusions as if the middle steps were optional scenery. His instinct hovered between two extremes. Either this is nonsense, or this is genius. So he did what mathematicians do when something feels impossible, he checked. One result working could be luck. Two might be coincidence. But page after page held together. The structure was too deep, too coherent to be accidental. And more unsettling still, some of the ideas weren't just correct, they were unfamiliar territory. At that moment, the tone shifted. Hardy realized he might be looking at a mind operating completely outside the academic pipeline, yet landing squarely in advanced mathematics. It was like discovering a master musician who'd never learned sheet music but could improvise symphonies. He shared the pages with colleagues. The room turned into a verification lab. Calculations. Recalculations. Long pauses. expressions drifting from confusion to surprise to a kind of stunned quiet. Every path led to the same conclusion. This wasn't imitation. This was original work and unusually powerful. Half-joking conversations floated around the department. We should confirm this person actually exists. Because the alternative was stranger, that these formulas had appeared out of thin air. The shock wasn't just intellectual. It challenged a comfortable assumption that elite mathematics grows exclusively from formal training. Here was a self-taught outsider punching through that narrative with nothing but insight. Hardy began writing back. Background details emerged slowly: poverty, isolation, relentless self-study, and a creative engine that didn't seem to know how to idle. The correspondence became a bridge between two worlds, a solitary thinker in South India and the institutional core of European mathematics. The formulas weren't merely proofs. They were language, the only introduction he needed. From that point forward, Ramanujan wasn't an invisible notebook writer anymore. His work entered the global conversation. Recognition didn't arrive as applause, it arrived as understanding. A letter changed the trajectory of mathematical history. And those formulas, written under financial strain and personal uncertainty, finally stepped onto a stage big enough to hold them. When Ramanujan eventually arrived in England, the shift felt seismic. His life went from solo improvisation to full orchestral collaboration. A self-taught genius from South India was suddenly walking into one of the world's most elite academic environments, and the contrast was almost cinematic. His partnership with Hardy quickly became legendary, not because they were similar, but because they were gloriously different. Hardy represented the European tradition: structure, proof, logical scaffolding. Ramanujan operated like intuition on overdrive, conclusions arriving first, explanations trailing behind like luggage that might or might not show up. When Cambridge scholars first studied his notebooks, it felt like encountering compressed data. The density was astonishing. Steps were missing. Arguments leaped forward. Someone joked that this wasn't skipping steps, it was teleportation. Hardy took on a translator's role. He unpacked Ramanujan's flashes of insight into forms the mathematical community could digest. Meanwhile, Ramanujan kept delivering results at a pace that made colleagues wonder where the source kept refilling. But brilliance doesn't cancel reality. Cultural friction showed up in the most ordinary places, especially food. Ramanujan's strict vegetarian diet collided with wartime shortages. Nutritional compromises piled up. Add England's damp cold to a body accustomed to tropical heat, and the strain became constant. All of this unfolded under the shadow of World War I. Supplies were tight. Anxiety hummed in the background. Academic life continued, but the atmosphere carried tension. And yet, paradoxically, this period marked one of his most productive phases. Together, Hardy and Ramanujan advanced number theory, series, and partition analysis with stunning momentum. It was as if his mind had entered a sustained burn, insight after insight surfacing with relentless clarity. But the body keeps its own ledger. Fatigue turned into illness. Weight loss into chronic weakness. Friends began noticing that the same man dazzling lecture halls was quietly deteriorating. The contrast was cruel. As his reputation rose, his physical resilience fell. Papers accumulated. Energy drained. Cambridge corridors echoed with admiration for his work and growing concern for his health. Success and fragility moved in parallel, a reminder that genius doesn't come with a warranty. As the saying goes, the candle that burns twice as bright burns half as long. At his brightest moment, the clock had already started ticking. Inside those Cambridge years, Ramanujan's creativity reached something close to mythic status. Colleagues later described watching him work as if he were tuning into a broadcast only he could hear. Ideas didn't crawl, they arrived. His work on integer partitions is a perfect example. The question sounds innocent: in how many ways can a number be expressed as a sum of integers? Beneath that simplicity lies a maze of complexity. For large numbers, brute force calculation becomes impossible. Ramanujan seemed to bypass the maze entirely. Working with Hardy, he helped derive an asymptotic formula that let mathematicians estimate partition counts with astonishing accuracy. It wasn't just computational convenience, it reframed how structure in number theory could be understood. Peers often had the same reaction. It felt like the answer showed up first, and the reasoning had to chase it down. His explorations of modular forms and infinite series carried the same signature elegance paired with speed. Some of his series for pi converged so rapidly that modern computers still lean on related ideas. If laptops could roll their eyes, they might mutter, "Well, that's efficient." For mathematicians trained to document every logical step, his style was both thrilling and intimidating. You could verify the result, but understanding why it worked might take months, sometimes years. It felt like receiving future technology with the manual missing. Yet his formulas weren't sterile machinery. They revealed patterns, glimpses of an underlying order where complexity collapses into simplicity. He had an uncanny ability to spot those patterns early, as if he were reading the blueprint instead of the finished building. The hearty Ramanujan collaboration remains one of mathematics' great partnerships because it demonstrated something rare: intuition and rigor don't have to compete, they can amplify each other. Their workflow resembled a duet. Ramanujan would present striking conclusions. Hardy would dissect and formalize them. One saw structure emerging, the other anchored it in proof. Together, they advanced analytic number theory in ways that rippled outward, influencing probability, combinatorics, and even theoretical physics. Their work didn't just solve problems, it expanded the toolkit mathematicians used to think about problems. Hardy later admitted that collaborating with Ramanujan was among the most exhilarating experiences of his career. It wasn't simply about results, it was about witnessing a different mode of thought operate at full capacity. If most research feels like careful composition, their partnership resembled improvisational jazz: complex rhythms, perfect timing, mutual trust. One mind glimpsed the horizon, the other built the road. And then there were the notebooks. If Ramanujan's published papers were impressive, his personal notebooks felt like opening a time capsule. Page after page recorded formulas with almost no commentary, conclusions standing alone, daring the reader to catch up. Mathematicians encountering them often followed the same emotional arc. That can't be right. Pause. Oh no, it is. Many entries resisted understanding for decades. Only as mathematical theory evolved did researchers return to verify and interpret what he'd written. Some results anticipated entire research directions that wouldn't fully bloom until much later. It was like discovering field notes from the future. For over a century, scholars have been decoding those pages. Each confirmed formula isn't just validation, it's a reminder of the scale of his intuition. The notebooks capture a mind working without institutional scaffolding, yet consistently landing on deep structure. His legacy isn't confined to finished theorems. It's an open landscape: questions, hints, pathways inviting exploration. Entire careers have grown from attempting to understand what he left behind. They remind us that mathematics isn't only the art of proof, it's also the art of seeing. And sometimes, someone sees so far ahead that it takes generations to arrive at the same view. When people first hear the phrase number theory, the reaction is usually polite admiration mixed with distance. Beautiful, they think. But what does this have to do with my life? And honestly, that's fair until the moment you tap your card, log into your bank, or send an encrypted message. That's when the plot twist lands. Those abstract integer games, the ones that seem like pure chalkboard poetry, are quietly holding up the security scaffolding of modern civilization. And somewhere near the roots of that invisible infrastructure stands a mathematician who once struggled to afford paper. Srinivasa Ramanujan. The irony is almost cosmic. Ramanujan wasn't trying to build banking systems or cybersecurity protocols. He was chasing structure, partition functions, infinite series, modular forms, ideas that looked, at the time, like pure mathematical art. Elegant, self-contained, almost impractically abstract. But mathematics has a funny habit: what seems useless today becomes essential tomorrow. As the saying goes, today's curiosity is tomorrow's infrastructure. Those same structures Ramanujan explored now echo inside algorithm design, cryptographic thinking, and high-precision computation. Number theory stopped being a gentleman's intellectual hobby and became part of the skeleton of the information age. When your banking app encrypts a transaction, it's relying on deep properties of integers. When your phone optimizes calculations, it's leaning on number-theoretic insights refined over decades. Put bluntly, a slice of modern financial security traces conceptual ancestry to a man who once worried about buying enough paper to write down his formulas. That's not just poetic, that's mathematics playing the long game. And the ripple doesn't stop there. In computer science, Ramanujan's work on series and analytic structures helped push forward numerical methods that modern machines still benefit from. High-precision computation, the kind used in simulations, cryptography, and scientific modeling, carries faint fingerprints of those early insights. If modern computers had personalities, they might shrug and say, "Yeah, this old math still runs the show." Physics joins the story too. As researchers probed quantum theory and later string theory, they kept running into mathematical structures suspiciously similar to the modular relationships Ramanujan explored. It was as if certain parts of the universe had been written in a dialect number theorists already understood. Engineers build systems. Computers execute instructions. Physicists model reality. And beneath all of that, you sometimes find equations drafted decades earlier by someone following pure intuition. It's like a bridge most people cross every day without ever seeing the blueprint or knowing who sketched it. Ramanujan didn't invent a gadget you can hold. He helped refine a way of seeing numerical order, a perspective that later engineers embedded into the machinery of modern life. His math didn't manufacture machines. It made machines possible. And that may be the most romantic truth about pure theory: it plants seeds whose harvest arrives generations later. As the years passed, Ramanujan's identity expanded beyond brilliant mathematician. He became a symbol, a cultural shorthand for intuition, genius, and the mysterious edges of human thought. Mathematicians talk about him with a kind of respectful contradiction. Here was someone who bypassed much of formal training yet reached into the discipline's deepest layers. That forces an old philosophical question back into the spotlight. Is mathematics invented or discovered? Ramanujan's work sits right in the middle of that debate. His style felt less like constructing a ladder and more like stepping directly onto the roof. He didn't always show the staircase, he just arrived. That sparked renewed philosophical curiosity. Is math a language humans design, or is it the grammar of reality waiting to be read? Culturally, his story travels far beyond academic circles. A largely self-taught thinker from modest circumstances reshapes a field thought to belong to institutional elites. That narrative carries an unmistakable romantic charge, the idea that human potential isn't confined to formal pathways. Still, the story isn't fairy dust. Talent needs structure. Intuition needs grounding. Ramanujan's breakthroughs gained lasting power because they were eventually integrated into rigorous frameworks. As another proverb reminds us, raw gold still needs refining. That's what makes him a bridge figure. On one side, instinct, vision, flashes of insight. On the other, proof, structure, discipline. His legacy shows these aren't enemies, they're collaborators. Culturally, he humanizes the word genius. Not a mythic lightning bolt, but a real person navigating struggle, creativity, and collaboration. His story reassures us that mathematics isn't a cold fortress of symbols, it's a living exploration of pattern, beauty, and possibility. After Ramanujan's death, his mathematics didn't freeze in time. It began to spread. Researchers kept returning to his notebooks and papers, mining them for ideas that continue to generate new questions. Many modern developments trace conceptual roots back to those early flashes of insight. His formulas behaved like seeds. Each generation planted them in new soil, new tools, new contexts, and watched unexpected branches grow. In education, his story became legend. Teachers use it to remind students that mathematics isn't just technique, it's a way of seeing. For countless young thinkers, hearing about Ramanujan is the moment abstract math stops feeling distant and starts feeling alive. At the same time, his legacy fueled a quiet revival of mathematical romanticism and appreciation for elegance, symmetry, and the aesthetic dimension of theory. Rigor and imagination stopped being framed as opposites. They became partners in the same creative act. What he left behind wasn't just a catalog of results. It was a mindset. Trust intuition. Embrace complexity. Assume hidden order. That mindset echoes across modern research and theoretical computation, information science, advanced physics, wherever people push against the boundaries of what's understood. His name now functions almost like a compass point for creativity, a reminder that the unknown isn't a wall, it's an invitation. And that's the real power of a legend, not nostalgia, but momentum. When mathematicians today face problems that seem immovable, Ramanujan's story lingers in the background. Not as a blueprint to copy, but as proof that thinking can outrun expectation. The legend doesn't end. It propagates through papers, classrooms, conversations, and sparks of inspiration in minds he never met. Some people calculate the world. Some people explain it. Ramanujan left something subtler. A reminder that imagination itself is a tool, one capable of reaching toward infinity. And as long as curiosity survives, that conversation with the infinite continues. The people who change the world usually just think one step deeper. If this story made you see things differently, hit like, subscribe, and save it. See you in the next story.